In the reading corner today, I'm very pleased to be welcoming Serena Patel, and we're going to be talking about her mystery series, Anisha, Accidental Detective. We're on the fourth book in the series, and we're going to be talking about that in some depth. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Actually, this has all happened, or it appears on the surface to have happened quite quickly for you. Your first book was only published last year, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah, the first book was published in March, and then the second one was out in September. We did the third one in July, and the fourth one's just come out. So yeah, it's been really fast
Yeah.
on the surface, as you say. We tend to work sort of 2 books ahead at any one time. And so book 2 had already been written and I think was being illustrated at that time by Emma. And I had already started writing the third book, Granny Trouble. And then I was editing that during the first lockdown. And then that sort of came out, obviously, that didn't come out till this July. So yeah, so it's I'm always working on more than one book at any one time.
Surprised you can keep your head around all of those plots and all of those mysteries. Anyway, we're going to talk about Anisha in a moment, but before we get there, I'd really like to know a little bit more about you and also when and why you started writing.
I've always written, loved writing as a child, had creative writing awards at school. If you'd have asked me when I was sort of 9, 10, what would your dream job be? I would have definitely said children's author because I loved books so very much. Loved going to the library. If it was ever my birthday or Christmas, I would always ask for books as my present or, money for books. And I didn't think that was something I could be. I couldn't see any authors who looked like me or had my background. I had a very fixed view of what an author looked like, of the kind of lifestyle they had. And it wasn't the same as mine. And I couldn't see any characters who looked like me in books either. And I don't think I really realised the impact of that until I was much older. But when I look back now, I think that probably compounded the idea that people like us didn't do that. We don't write stories. Our stories are not out there. And so I just sort of wrote that off as a bit of a dream. I just think that's not going to happen. There's no point reaching for that. But I did always write. I kept diaries. I used to write poetry all through my life. Whenever I was kind of struggling a bit, or just looking for something to do, I would turn to story writing. When my niece was born, my niece is 16 now, but when she was little, she would say to me, Auntie, make me up a story. So I used to make up these, we would just be sitting and I'd make up these stories for her. So it never really went away, but I don't think I really thought it was something I could pursue seriously until after I had my own children. So there was a big gap between being a child and then becoming a mother myself for me to actually think, this is a dream I really want to pursue and maybe it's possible.
I did read on your biography on your website that in actual fact it was Roald Dahl that, you enjoyed reading when you were at school, and that Matilda in particular, actually that is one of his perhaps more innocuous books. So there's a sort of tension there really, isn't there? Because Dahl obviously did get so many children reading, but actually we've come to understand that some of the values in those books, they're not very good about race. They're not very good about women. So I wondered whether when you were reading them as a younger person, whether you noticed that and how you feel about them now.
Those were the books that were available. Those were the books that were popular. They were the books that, I wanted to read. But I think I didn't really see the impact of not seeing myself in books. And so I just accepted what was in front of me. So I was the only child of colour in my entire primary school. And so I was always other. And I was always different. And that came to be normal. And I think not seeing myself in books kind of compounded that idea that you're different, you're other, and actually almost invisible. And that's probably how I felt. I never felt like I was reflected in stories. I just accepted that was the way it was. And similarly, when reading books by authors like Dahl, by Enid Blyton, I just sort of didn't question it, I suppose. And because nobody around me questioned it, I suppose that just made it seem like it was normal. And I had experienced racism as a child. We lived in a primarily white neighbourhood. I was accustomed to being called racist names across the street. There was racist graffiti in the area we lived in. So I think you don't realise the impact of these things when you're a child, but you realise when you're a grown up and you look back with reflection, with more awareness, and you realise how bad that actually was. And when I look back now, I know, and as you say, we do question those books now, and we do realise and we do have awareness. And it makes me feel sad, really, that this author that I really looked up to and wanted all of his books, it's like being let down, isn't it? Because that's somebody you really looked up to, and actually their views and the things that they've put into those books are actually really harmful. So yeah, it's sad. And I hope that we all know that we need to do better by our children. We need to think about what we're putting out there, and books can be a really powerful thing for children, and so we should be putting the very best out there that we can.
Which brings us very nicely to talking about Anisha. And she is, well, it says accidental detective. And perhaps we could start with a little bit of an introduction to her as a character. What's she like?
So Anisha is 10. She's a very logical person. She likes what she knows. She loves her books. She loves reading. She loves science. She's very inquisitive. She will always stand up for what's right. And if she can see an injustice or somebody being blamed for something they didn't do, she will always try and help and try and stand up for them. But she hates the limelight. She doesn't like to be under the spotlight at all. She'll always be kind of behind the scenes if she can. And she has a very close friend. She has a best friend called Milo, and he's always with her. Whatever they're doing, they're together. And then Anisha has this extended family. So she lives with her mum and dad and her Granny Jazz. Granny Jazz is quite a kind of core character to the family, really. She's feisty, she's mischievous, but she's so supportive of Anisha. And I really enjoy writing Granny Jazz, actually. And then she's got her extended family, so her Aunty Bindi, her Uncle Tony, her cousins Mindy and Manny, and there's always something going on. Whether it be in the first book, there's a big family wedding and a kidnapped groom. In the second book, there's a science fair and an exploded foam volcano, which Anisha gets the blame for. In the third book, they're on a family road trip, which I'm sure lots of families can identify with. And they go to Leicester, and Granny Jazz gets arrested for the theft of a jewel. And Anisha, of course, has to step in and save her granny from jail. And then in the most recent book, in Showstoppers, there's a school play, and they have 1 week to put this school play on. And Anisha, of course, this is not her thing at all, because she doesn't like the spotlight. But she ends up being the director's assistant. But somebody's messing with their musical and trying to make things go wrong. And so, of course, Anisha sees how important this musical is to her friends, in particular Mindy. And so she decides to help and try and investigate and figure out who's trying to ruin the big day. And so the series has always got mysteries in it. There's a big focus on families and friendship. And those are the things that are important to Anisha, really. And that's the kind of core message of the series, really.
So does Anisha have any flaws, or is her main flaw about wanting to avoid the limelight?
I think sometimes she doesn't believe in herself very much. She does kind of hit stumbling blocks sometimes and thinks, I just can't do it. But that's what her friends are there for, and her family, and they always kind of, give her a bit of a boost and tell her she can do it, and help her and are there by her side. Sometimes perhaps she kind of grabs hold of a theory and sort of runs with it, and it's not quite the right theory. But hopefully that adds to the story and kind of gives us our twists and turns for the mystery.
Absolutely. I have to say, I love her family. They feel very real, and that's probably because they are. I mean, they probably are based on lots of people that and I imagine that you are putting elements of your life into those stories, and that's why it feels so authentic to me. Is that true?
Yeah, definitely. I think the whole series really has been hugely inspired by real life and by our extended family. You know, my husband is one of 5 siblings. Some of them have partners, some of them have children. So when we're all together, it's quite a lot of us. And that really was kind of the core idea behind the series, that when there's lots of family members together, there's always something funny going on, or, you know, there's so much potential for disaster and humour. And that's where it came from, really. And you're right, you know, some of the characters do have elements of our family members in them. Granny Jazz herself is inspired by my own grandmother and by my mother-in-law. Aunty Bindi is inspired by a few different people. I think I might even be a little bit Aunty Bindi. You know, Anisha, you know, a little bit of my younger self, a lot of my daughter. My daughter's 10, and, you know, she is very much like Anisha. And I take huge inspiration from my children, because they come home and I get the kind of lowdown of everything that's happened in their school day. And, you know, this person said this in the playground, and this person did this in the classroom. And I think I'm storing all of that up. And then sometimes it does find its way into the story. So that's probably why it does feel quite real.
And I think sometimes when I've spoken to children about, you know, where they get ideas, where they can get ideas for their writing, they don't often realise that they can draw on their own life experiences. They think a story is something that happens over there and real life is over here. But actually, it's the best thing to mine for stories.
Definitely, yeah. And I do say, when I go into schools, you know, we do a workshop where I ask the children to think of something quite ordinary that's happened, and let's, you know, amplify it. Let's make it big and silly and daft, and make it entertaining for the purposes of a story. And quite often you get the most fantastic ideas out of something really small that's, you know, an argument they've had with a sibling, or, you know, their mum went to the fridge and all the food came flying out. You know, you get some really great ideas, really funny story starters. And they're kind of amazed. I came up with that myself, you know, out of something really simple.
Now, the school play, it's a great one to have at the core of a mystery. And in this particular one, you know, it allows us to talk about superstition and sabotage and misdirection. What's going on with this school play?
So they've entered a competition, and the prize is a summer school place at this great arts academy in the city. And they're taking part. They've got 1 week to put on a musical. They've got a collection of themes that they could pick from. And Anisha's school pick out Einstein. So and on the surface you think, oh, a musical about Einstein, you know, how's that going to go? But actually what they do is they focus in on the other elements of Einstein's life. So, for example, he was a keen sailor, although he wasn't very good at it. He enjoyed playing the violin, and there's all these other things, all these elements that they bring out. And of course, everybody's clambering to get a leading part. So they have to go through an audition process. And Anisha's first reaction is that she doesn't want to be part of it at all. She realises she can be part of it in a different way. So she signs up to be the director's assistant and helps her teacher, Miss Jive. But quite quickly, things start to go wrong, as they often do in Anisha's world. And she realises that somebody is trying to derail the production and, you know, stop it from going ahead.
One of the things that I was going to ask you or to mention is that you have this lovely way of feeding in some little bits about, you know, his wife was actually quite important, you know.
Yes, I try to. And, you know, I think that makes it interesting, something that you didn't know about that person, you know. And also, you know, I think it's important that we, you know, have these hidden figures in history that we can kind of talk about and learn about, because I'm always learning new things, and particularly through my children, because they're learning history from a different perspective than we learned. You know, the history we learned at school was quite restricted, and so they're always telling me facts that I didn't know. And I think that's quite nice to be able to put something, little tidbits like that in the books.
And sometimes you put little footnotes in just to give us a bit more information about Diwali. And
yes,
it's a sort of, which in itself is quite funny.
Yeah, that idea actually came very early on in the series from my agent, and that was something she suggested that we do. And readers seem to really like it, and I think it's nice because it's in Anisha's voice. You know, it's not done in a kind of a formal way. It's all in Anisha's voice, and it's like she's telling you that bit of information, and I think that comes across quite nicely.
Yeah, it'd be lovely to hear a bit if you'd like to read us a section
Yes.
from this story?
Oh, yes, I'd love to. So I'm going to pick up the story when they're in the auditions. So they've just had the auditions for Einstein, and I won't spoil how that goes because that's quite a funny scene. But they kind of settle back down again, and now they're going to watch the next set of auditions. When everything's settled down again, it's time for the auditions for the leading lady, Mileva. First, Bina Bat struts out, wearing what looks like a fake fur coat. Two of her besties stand either side of her, primping her hair and spraying hairspray at her. She swats them away. I shake my head. Only Bina Bat would have an entourage for a school play audition. Milo stands at the side of the hall looking quite scared. If he does win the lead role, being married to Bina would probably make it a lot less fun. Miss Jive gives her a thumbs up. Okay, show us what you've got, Bina. Good luck. Bina smiles sweetly and starts. I'm Mileva, Einstein's wife. He adores me, but I think he spends too much time with his stupid experiments. Miss Jive splutters as she's sipping a cup of tea and sprays it everywhere. Bina, dear, that's not the sort of thing she'd say, is it? There's lots of great material you could have used for inspiration in the script. What about the scene where she's helping him with his equations? Mileva was very supportive of Einstein. Have you read the scene at the kitchen table? Bina rolls her eyes. No, but I think she would be annoyed that he paid so much attention to his work. And you said we have to act how we think they'd act. This is my interpretation of the role. Miss Jive frowns. Yes, well, that's not exactly what I meant. Have you got a song you can show us? Bina sighs, annoyed. Well, yeah, okay. I didn't like any of the songs in the script, so I created my own number. I would use it in the play if I were you. Anyway, Layla, Amani, get out here, she hisses to her friends. They totter out from behind the stage curtain, grinning nervously. Bina starts her audition again, this time with her entourage. They do a weirdly aggressive song about being the best, but they're so out of tune. I have to cover my ears, which makes Bina give me a hard stare. They finish with Bina in the centre doing a star-shaped pose and shaking her hair wildly. Miss Jive clears her throat. I think we've seen enough, Bina. Is there anyone else back there who wants to audition for this role? Silence.
I can just picture it. Were you ever in a school play yourself?
The only play I can ever remember being in is in primary school and I think I was one of the seven dwarfs. I think we did a little Christmassy type production of Snow White. And I think I was one of the seven dwarfs. But yeah, that's the only one I can remember.
There's nothing quite like a school play for pulling children together, actually. It's a really interesting thing. I wanted to ask you about some of your tips, really, for writing. So with writing a mystery, a crime mystery, plot's really important, isn't it? So do you find that you have to have that all mapped out at the beginning, or do you
Yes.
discover what's going to happen as you go along?
Well, it's mainly planning and plotting up front. And then there is a little bit of discovering as you go along, because with all the will in the world, you can have the tightest plot, the best laid plans and all that. But as you're writing, you might find that something's not working quite so well as you thought it would. But I do now, because we're releasing 2 books a year, so it's quite an intense schedule that we're on. So I do have to do a lot of planning, because otherwise I'd just be, I have a tendency to write off on a tangent, and then I'd have to kind of come back and fix that in the editing stage. So we sort of try and nail down the story as much as possible up front and agree that with my editors, to make sure we think all the elements of the story are working. And then I'll start writing. And I write my first drafts quite quickly. So I write them sort of anywhere between 4 and 8 weeks. And then we kind of go into the editing process. And we might edit 3 or 4 times before it goes off to Emma for illustrating. So yeah, lots and lots of planning.
And what do you consider to be the elements, the ingredients of a really good mystery story?
So I think obviously we've got to have a detective that we're rooting for, really, that, we want them to solve the mystery, and we can see their reasons for why they want to solve the mystery as well. I think you've got to have, a good crime. Obviously, writing for a younger audience, have to think about what crimes are going to be appropriate for the series. You need suspects and people behaving suspiciously. You need clues, you need the kind of clues that are leading you the right way. And of course, you need red herrings, they're essential to a mystery to lead our detective down the wrong path and, give us those twists and turns. And you need a satisfactory reveal, really, because, we want to know who did it. We want to know why. We want to be convinced of their reasons. And then another thing that's really important to mysteries is the setting as well, to have that interesting setting and for it to be almost a closed setting so that, your number of suspects is limited and can see how the detective comes to their conclusion. So, that can be quite challenging to come up with an interesting setting as well.
Really good set of ingredients there. And I know that you've also been involved in another mystery crime or crime mystery project with Robin Stevens. Maybe you could take just a few minutes and you could tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is the Very Merry Murder Club anthology published by Farshawe, and it's 13 of some of the the most current authors. We've got a really diverse and inclusive set of stories, and it's just a really wonderful thing to be part of, actually. And obviously Robin is queen of crime and an author I look up to, and her series has been hugely successful, so it's a big honour to be asked. We sort of came up with a list of authors we'd like to work with. And I think one of the things for me was that, it comes back to this idea that when we were growing up, books perhaps weren't so representative, didn't give a reflection of society. And actually the crime genre, I think, particularly, wasn't inclusive and didn't kind of have those different elements. And so it's really nice to be able to invite authors from all different backgrounds to contribute to the anthology and to have a really fresh set of stories with all different environments and settings and characters, and I think it's a really nice mix and the stories are just fantastic. So yeah, it's a real honour to be involved with it.
It's brilliant. Things are changing, for the better, both in terms of characters in books and also, the writers, the illustrators, and hopefully the publishing industry more widely is changing as well. What other things do you think need to be put in place to help young writers come forward and feel that this is something that they could do?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, I think one of the things is that publishing needs change all the way through, from the top down. And I think that's something we recognise needs to happen. I think authors that are already published, just going out and encouraging young people. And, every school I go to, there will be a child that puts their hand up and says, I want to be an author. And that really fills my heart because, we never had author visits when I was growing up. And so I think, to see an author who looks like you, who is publishing books, I think that can be a powerful thing as well, and empower children to really live those dreams and aim for them. I think it just needs the effort that we have. I think there just needs to be more, and and all of us working together really to make the most inclusive and positive and empowering books that we can.
Well, Serena, thank you so much for writing empowering books and for joining me in the Reading Corner today to tell me more about them. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been fun.
In the Reading Corner is presented by Nikki Gamble and produced by Alison Hughes. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please do leave a review for us. To find out about other projects, including an audience with events and the Exploring Children's Literature Summer School, visit www.exploringchildrensliterature.uk. Join us again soon in the Reading Corner on your favourite podcast platform.